Start that record, and we are recording.
Hello again.
Rolling episode. What number is this? 4, 5,
4?
6, 15?
5. One of them.
4, I think.
Yes, episode 4.
Welcome to the Kinetik Creators podcast, where we break down and talk about interesting and creative happenings, events, and news. I'm Simon.
And I'm Robert. Thanks for joining us today. We have a lot of things to talk about and break down for you, so let's get started. This week, we want to start with a little something. When was the last time you went to McDonald's and the ice cream machine was broken?
Real question is, when was the last time I've been to McDonald's? I was trying to figure that out.
Well, yeah, that's true too. Yes, yeah. So somebody basically made a website called McBroken.com. And this dude, he basically built an app that calls the McDonald's app API every 30 minutes and checks every McDonald's in the world to see if you can buy a McFlurry or an ice cream. And if you can't, basically gives you a little map output that says you can't buy ice cream. All of the ones around us except one are currently operational, but
I might treat myself after this podcast then. That's still going.
It's a really interesting thing. I mean, it's so funny though, because like it's such a meme, right? And
like,
and he was like, you know what? I'm just gonna like build something that attempts to solve this problem.
yeah, it's kind of funny too. You're talking about the meme. There's just like, it's become a meme so long that we've just kind of accepted it as normal. And so like, just the idea of, I just like for the longest time I've always assumed like the McDonald's machines being broken was just like code for like, no, we don't want to deal with that. Like either you came too close to closing time or whatever. It's like, no, it's actually like, I didn't even know if McDonald's or like delivered working ice cream machines to their restaurants. And it's like, no, this is for show. It's just to like take up space on the floor.
Well, from what I've read, it's actually the machine being broken is actually code for them cleaning the machine.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
This guy posted his website to Hacker News, which is a big, website for tech people and all that. And there was a big conversation that ensued about the fact that it's basically for cleaning. Mm-hmm. So there were two things that came out of it. If it's broken, it means it's cleaning, and they never clean the machines. And it's impossible to clean the machines well. So you really shouldn't order ice cream from McDonald's anyway, because it's probably gross. Which is funny because they're so frequently broken anyway. So, yeah.
It's funny. It's like, none of this surprises me, but it somehow it's like light bulbs are going off. It's like, oh yeah. Like an ice cream machine would be pretty difficult to clean. And so like, I would much rather say it's like, yeah, it's broken.
It's broken today.
Like having to explain to like customer 87 this afternoon why you're showing up at 2 a.m. hungover, about just explaining the mechanics of this machine that you don't care about, because like the bottom line is like, you can't get the ice cream you wanted for 99 cents. But maybe that was also the red flag, 99-cent ice cream. But you know what you're getting.
Yeah, there's a certain bar that you're clearing there. It's actually a pretty interesting website, because what he does, so like the way he does it, so he calls the McDonald's API through their app. And this is really interesting because basically the app does not tell you if you can or cannot purchase ice cream until you have tried to put ice cream into your cart. So what he does is, and this is kind of the clickbait headline everybody's been using. So basically what he's doing is he's placing an order, quote unquote, for ice cream at every McDonald's every 30 minutes. And that comes out to be over 18 grand. which is simultaneously a lot of money and not as much money as I would have thought it would be to order an ice cream at every McDonald's in their app or in the world, whatever it is, at once. And so it's a little bit of a clickbait because he's not actually ordering the ice cream. It's just kind of running through the software, the API based software interface to see if you can. But it's pretty interesting. And supposedly since he launched this website, this launched maybe this past week, end of October, he basically the amount of traffic since he's launched it, he put on Reddit, he put on Hacker News, put on Twitter, and since he's launched it, like his hosting and like maintenance fees went from like, moderate and not much, probably $30 or so a year, to 5 figures a month, like literally tens of thousands of dollars, because so many people are accessing the website now. And I think we're probably both on the website at the moment, so we're helping to drive that up. So, I don't know, just funny little thing what you can do with, with a little bit of free time and the right knowledge, you can kind of fix that little problem that everybody feels pretty easily.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, 8.5% of all McDonald's ice cream machines are currently broken as of recording this. Los Angeles, you're in the lead with 21%. So another broken or maybe shut down news.
Ooh, get them.
This week, the streaming app and service Quibi, Quibi, for those of you who aren't aware, announced
which is apparently almost everyone.
Yes. Well, and that's interesting because they had quite a few. Well, we'll get there in a second, but yeah, they announced that they're shutting down after raising $2 billion, billion with a B, in capital and money, American $1 billion, American freedom monies. They raised all this money. They had investors like Alibaba, Disney, Warner Brothers, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, HBO. They launched in March, and they are now shutting down. And the idea is that it's a mobile only streaming service. And it's kind of like these short episodes, original content specifically shot for your phone. Their whole like tagline is movie quality shows for your phone. So it's they have this proprietary app. They signed with like lots of big name entertainment stars. Anna Kendrick, the Kardashians,
Chrissy Teigen, Chance the Rapper.
Lots of big people
Reese
signed.
Witherspoon, yeah,
and they actually I think signed exclusive rights to streaming the new Reno 911, or they made a new Reno 911. Either way, and so they had this big idea to kind of revolutionize like mobile streaming, and they're shutting down after about what was that 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, I remember hearing about them during the Super Bowl, and I was like, today's is Halloween, so that kind of tells you about how long that window was.
It's a long time. And they raised $2 billion, which is a lot of money.
I was actually pulled up the calculator app because I'm going to just start measuring things by how much McFlurries you can buy. And so you said like 18 grand was enough to buy one McFlurry for every McDonald's in the world. So $2 billion will get you 1,111,111 McFlurries. So
from every restaurant?
Yep.
So that's the new measure for venture capital is how many McFlurries can you buy?
Yeah.
From every restaurant in the world, every McDonald's in the world. And so Quibi, obviously like this is big news because it's so much money. There's so much into it. There's so much writing on this thing, but almost nobody that I know and you alluded to this earlier, Simon, has actually heard of it.
No, it's kind of funny just going into like looking into like their development and how even just like how they market themselves. They were very just confident that Quibi would be the next big thing.
Yeah.
If anything, it feels like a parody or like a fake streaming site. Just like the way it was promoted, is like all of these random celebrities talking about Quibi. You can watch Quibis, and like without really explaining what a Quibi is, and which is like, a 10-minute mobile only video film, and but by really just kind of like by being that confident or being that or
well, yeah, I mean, like being that confident, like promising so much,
but also not promising enough,
right?
I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Because one of the things that they wanted to do was like capitalize on like the 10-minute gaps for like commuters. They were targeting people who were like, you're sitting on the subway for 10 minutes at a time, or you're waiting for the next bus stop, or you're in between meetings. Yeah. And it's like, hey, fill your time instead of, trying to spend time on Facebook or Twitter or scrolling through all of these I was gonna say Vines, RIP,
listening to the Kinetik Creators podcast.
yes listening to a couple topics of the Kinetik Creators podcast, or binging, or like that was kind of the thing, though. Like 10 minutes is a strange amount of time to, like, there's not a lot of content that fits that window. Like TikToks are infamously shorter. YouTube videos, vary, but again, they're not as bingeable or mobile focused as Quibi, and being mobile focused on like the length of time, but also being mobile focused and like
the form factor. Really,
you can watch it horizontally or vertically.
Which is interesting. I mean, that is a pretty interesting prospect in terms of like, it doesn't matter which way I'm holding my phone to watch this content. But yeah, I think like the big thing that everybody is looking at, and just for context, like they did have about 3 million downloads and about 1.5 million active users in the first few months. But because of their timing with launch, suddenly people were just sitting at home. And we all have Netflix, we all have Hulu, Disney Plus, of course, just came out. And what was that, December of last year?
Yeah.
So like the uphill battle in terms of the business model and the timing just was not there, And
it's unfortunate. Like, we are the mobile streaming site for people on the go, and now nobody is on the go.
Right. And unfortunately, just, the content promised was not enough to bring in new users. And really, even for me, like the only reason I knew about it was because of Twitter. I didn't see it, if I can remember. I mean, there might have been about a week and a half where I saw some ads for it, on Instagram or whatever. But for the most part, I didn't really hear about it. And I would imagine that most people that I know have no idea what it is. So yeah, it was just kind of a series of failures, really, I think, and unluck.
Yeah, it was again, going back to the idea of like people being unfamiliar with it. I remember a few months ago, just like circulating around, I guess, like film YouTube, film Twitter, just like what Quibi was, and kind of like analyzing it. Like a few months after it's been established, it's been out there. And one of the things that was noted, besides like the whole, targeted for people on the go and we're not going anywhere, was that I guess just being, it's one thing to be focused on it's one thing to be focused on like being mobile centered, but they also shot themselves on the foot by refusing to like by eliminating casting options until like became too late, or until like interest died down. And another thing that I thought was interesting, YouTuber, another thing that I thought that was interesting was just like how the formatting changes from horizontal to vertical. They really didn't do much narratively, from what I was told. It's just like, it's just kind of like
just different.
Yeah, cropping. You just cropped into the middle of the frame, and that's kind of a missed opportunity, especially for if you're telling like original stories. That's a great opportunity to tell original stories in original ways. And so like if you lose that much of the frame, that's like just a great opportunity to do something thematically. I'm thinking like, for mysteries, that's things that are something that's right out of frame, or especially like horror films, that all of these it's just like really embracing the medium rather than embracing or trying to manufacture a movement. Right.
Yeah, one of the other things that kind of, I mean, even in addition to that, is like, this is raising the question of, good startup failure, right? Like everybody knows that most startups don't make it. Most entrepreneurs don't make it. It's like 90% of businesses fail in the first 4 years. And so this is raising that question of, they raise so much money from so many high profile places. Is this kind of the downfall of like, or the beginning of the downfall of like good startup failure? Or is it just a necessary byproduct of the industry? People want to see good ideas. They want to see crazy stuff. They want to see things that are wild and maybe won't work. And then, and they want to see it succeed. And then sometimes, well, obviously in this case, very high profile, doesn't succeed. Yeah. I mean,
it really is interesting. It's like, as much fun it is, and how easy it is to like dunk on like a $2 billion failure. It is still very like, it's interesting to see it's interesting to see what it takes to become successful, because obviously it's not just enough to like have
bukus of money
and like famous faces, but also we really didn't even touch on the fact like the creators of Quibi were from let's say Disney and Google. Yeah, and they're like, they have years of experience in create in like high profile work environments in terms of like technology and entertainment and like connection, but like how all of these elements aren't enough.
Yep.
But then on the positive side, like if you're lacking in like all of these areas, that doesn't necessarily dictate your trajectory
or your success. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. It's definitely a good example of product market fit, and whether or not the market demands this level of product. And unfortunately right now it just doesn't. So, and for a little comparison, Netflix released some of their streaming numbers this week. Was that this week? Yeah, it was this week.
Yeah, this week.
And that's been pretty interesting to me to see. Specifically, a lot of their original content in their original films was the data around watched at least 2 minutes of the film, and then watched, or 70% of the film was completed. Lots of very high numbers here. 80 million for Bird Box, 70% of the film completed. Murder Mystery had 73 million, etc. So there's a lot of, I think it's just showing like the juggernaut that Netflix has become.
Also like the variety just off
the
the
variety,
top.
absolutely.
Bird Box is like, a dystopian horror thriller, but then you have Tall Girl as like a teen romantic comedy. The Irishman is Scorsese drama that wouldn't really fit the current theater model, just being like a 3-hour drama. But yeah, the El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, the spin-off to like the famous TV show Closure to Walter White, never mind. Wait, I'll take that part out. Like just closure for the characters in the Breaking Bad story.
Absolutely. And this is also like, we never see numbers from Netflix. Like they just don't release numbers very frequently, if ever. And so it's interesting on one hand that they're releasing these numbers now after, all of us have been stuck at home for a while. And it's also interesting to see what specifically they want to highlight to people in terms of their original content, because this is just the original films, and there's a little bit of a breakdown about some of the differences and like from like July to October, things like that. But this is just original content. This isn't even speaking to the licensed content that they have. Obviously the last summer, like Avatar: The Last Airbender was hugely popular.
Yes.
There's a couple other ones that just blew up in popularity in the last couple months that everybody was watching. And so even just seeing like, not necessarily extrapolating unnecessarily, but even just thinking about like, this is what their original content is doing. Just think about like how well their licensed content is doing. And that's a really interesting thing to think about in terms of like, Netflix kind of taking over the market. And then you compare that with Quibi trying to come up and say like, that's an uphill battle in a lot of ways, not just from the form factor, not just from the business model, but just from the fact that the market is so heavily controlled by Netflix. And it's you need something very, very unique. And, Quibi just kind of missed I think they kind of missed the mark on that one, maybe in another year. And this is also something too, that it could be is that it's the right type, it could be just that it's the right form factor, it's the right type of content, it's just the wrong time for it, and that's very likely that in another 3 or 4 years, somebody else is going to come along and do, Quibi 2 or whatever it's going to be. And suddenly they're going to be like, man, this is amazing. This is going to be bigger than Netflix. This is going to be bigger than, any of these other companies right now. So.
Yeah. Just thinking about, you're talking about like the future of Quibi. One thing I recently read was just like, one thing that Quibi did right in terms of like their content creators was like they gave them 100% ownership of what they were making. And so so if you're like part of like the creative process, it's like partnering with Quibi, partnering and seeing like, I'm working with the people who helped launched people who were like connected to Disney, Google, and then all of these famous celebrities. It's like they targeted themselves and framed themselves as like a company or a organization of quality. And so again, if you're creating original content, your odds are it's just you don't see that being able to retain and have 100% have 100% control and ownership of your own properties. Unfortunately, doing right by their creators kind of is making it harder for them to now sell Quibi, because it's like, what are buyers left buying exactly?
For sure.
Sorry. Oh, and another thing with the Netflix, you're talking about how it's interesting what they're highlighting. I'm just looking at this chart of like, the chart of like 2 minutes of minimum watched, and that just leaves me a question, like why is that the metric? There, I guess this just tells me, like, after 2 minutes of watching, you're probably committed.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's one way to look at it is like, the 2 minutes of watching versus the 70% of the film completed. You can kind of look there and say you could do a little compare and contrast. I think the thing that we can often do everywhere is that we can tend to pull stats out and look at them independently, right? And say like, this stat makes no sense by itself, which is very tempting to do for everything. But then when you look at it in context and say, okay, so there's watch 2 minutes of the film, which would probably be more of an exploration or advertising based stat, right? Like, how many people actually ended up trying the film based on ads, based on how it's presented on the app or whatever. And then you kind of compare that and say, okay, now once they've watched 70%, what is that number, and where and how do different things line up? Whereas with watch at least 2 minutes of the film, the top one is Extraction, which was released in April, had 99 million views. But the top one for 70% of film completed was Bird Box. At least if I'm reading these charts correctly. So yeah, that's it's interesting, and they're kind of even outlining here about how Netflix is changing its reach metric from these two things. So its reach metric is more about who that advertising and that exploration piece, which is the 2 minutes, versus watching 70% of the film, which is a much higher bar to pass. So I think that's also interesting, is that they're also like kind of changing what they're looking at there. So yeah, so if you were going to look at a stat that was like, watched one episode of an original series, that might be even a different stat for, how good their content actually is or something.
Yeah. I'm also wondering, like, how much memes play into this, because I found out of Bird Box because of all of the blindfold memes. So yeah, absolutely.
And just going to go down the list of streaming services today, I guess. This is the streaming episode for Apple TV Plus. Jon Stewart has announced a new current affairs series to be hosted on Apple TV Plus. He'll be executive producer and the host / anchor of the series. It's untitled. Nobody knows what it's going to be called yet, but it'll be interesting. Jon Stewart's been out of the game now for at least not hosting since he's hosted The Daily Show. He left that 2014, 15, something like that.
Yeah, right before the 2 elections ago.
Yeah. So, interesting to see what that's going to take shape.
Yeah. It's been interesting because it's been funny. Like Jon Stewart is like, Jon Stewart is just like, has been a voice for so long in terms of like current events, current affairs, which is really strange considering like the platform he built a lot of his audience off of, like The Daily Show on Comedy Central. That wouldn't be my go-to in terms of like thinking like important voices of a generation or a culture or anything like that. But his insight, his passion, his perspective, and all of those things has been missed in terms of just like processing like things going on in the world currently for the past several years. And so it'll be interesting to see what he does, with rest and time away from writing and being just in the the constant machine of, you know, looking at news, interpreting news, and kind of just presenting it 5 days a week for
years.
Years,
I mean, he
yeah,
was there
decades.
for a long time.
Yeah, is that like 17 years by the time he retired?
I think so. Yeah, something like that.
And part of that 10-year run was like 10 of that 17-year stint was like 10 years of consecutive Emmy wins. And so, after all that, it'll be interesting to see what's next. He, besides popping out from the bottom of Stephen Colbert's desk on The Late Show, and it's also interesting because of like, just late night has changed.
Absolutely.
Or is continuing to change.
It's evolving.
Obviously, this year, a lot of late night shows aren't like filming in their studios, and so like being able to embrace like that whole a naturalistic, stripped down aesthetic, and kind of like really leaning into what the show is, like a charismatic individual sharing their perspective about what's going on in the world. And so I'm curious to see if John's new show will be like that, or if it will be similar to Letterman, who, you know, another well-known, established, an icon for that late night format, kind of stepping away from retirement after, you know, just saying like, I've given it my all, I'm done, I need to step away, and now returning to streaming. David Letterman's on Netflix with his, I guess, needs no introduction series, and being able to like interview guests that need no introduction, like Obama, Chappelle, other famous people that, you know, need no introduction.
Yeah, and I think this will be interesting too, because it's going to be on Apple TV Plus, which the only other really big name they have is Oprah right now.
Which is a name.
Which is, I mean, obviously a huge name, and not that she needs any support, but, you know, I think the offering on Apple TV Plus with their original content, because they haven't been able to, as far as I'm aware, they haven't been able to license as much extra content for the service as much as they're creating original stuff. So I think this will be a big help for them as well, where you have all these people who are huge Daily Show fans, probably are still Daily Show fans, watching Trevor Noah's show. They're probably watching Late Show with Stephen Colbert. And now they're going to be like, oh, Jon Stewart here, I'm going to go get me an Apple TV Plus subscription so I can see that, and I can kind of look at that. The other thing I'm interested about is that Netflix tried, so it's going to be a one topic, 1 hour episode is
so
what
like
they're saying.
Deep dives.
Yeah, which is very similar to the format that Netflix was doing with Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj, who's also from The Daily Show. So I'm curious how it's going to be different in terms of format, because they just canceled that, you know.
After 2 seasons?
I think it was 3 seasons.
Like 2, 3, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, I'm curious to see how they're going to do that and how that's going to be different, since, I mean, as far as I'm aware, Patriot Act was pretty hugely popular. And so how's that going to be different? What is it going to look like, you know, from a format, from a production standpoint, from a news, like, you know, obviously Jon Stewart is a comedian, but is it going to be, you know, that level of funny still? Is it going to be more serious? You know, like, what is it going to be, and how's that going to take shape? So I don't know. Part of me feels like it's going to be very similar to the way they did Patriot Act, but maybe more close to a traditional late night show. That's just my guess, though, with literally no expertise in the area.
Yeah. I mean, we don't even have a title. We just have, like, you know, the announcement that Apple and Jon Stewart will be partnering together for this project.
Yep, absolutely.
And you were talking about like how Patriot Patriot Act is no longer on Netflix, and so like that's as far as I like just off the top of my head, that's the only competitor in terms of like streaming current events deep dives. So
John Oliver's show.
on HBO.
Yeah, but that's also a different platform as well. And one of the interesting things about HBO and Patriot Act was that they were putting all the monologues on YouTube for free.
Yeah.
So like I never felt the need to like go get a subscription if I just wanted to watch it for whatever reason. Yeah. So I wonder if they'll do the same thing with this show, or if they'll keep it all kind of hush hush on Apple TV.
Yeah, switching from one acclaimed artist, creative in a platform, pivoting towards another direction. We have news of Kendrick Lamar signing to UMPG, Universal Music Publishing Group, as a excuse me. Kendrick Lamar signed to an exclusive worldwide administrative deal with Universal Music Publishing Group. That was announced earlier in the week in October. And so for, people unaware of who Kendrick Lamar is, he's a Compton-based rapper, but he's really exploded outside of just like the hip hop sphere in terms of influence. His obviously he's been known for his cultural and societal anthems. All Right has been sung and shouted from on the streets for various protests for years now. He's also the only artist that's not a classical or jazz musician to win a Pulitzer Prize. So it's pretty fair to say that he has a important he's been making a mark on culture. And so it's interesting because it's interesting this signing is interesting because it's interesting because all of this success has been done with like the smallish label TDE, Top Dog Entertainment, which is comprised of like it's almost been like a family dynamic of terms of like artists, songwriters, rappers, and producers working as like this team. And so the not just like the biggest artist from the label, but it's like one of the biggest artists today, kind of pivoting to be a part of a bigger label. It's just very interesting to see like the big fish in the small pond kind of like create a new path. And then on that same note, in terms of like creating a new path, early in the year, Kendrick Lamar announced in classic Kendrick fashion, which by that I mean just like both creative but also conceptually abstract.
Sure, right.
And so he announced the launch of a new media entertainment company, for lack of a better term. It's called PG Lang. The website is very straightforward in the fact that it's not straightforward. They announced their existence with like a welcome to PG Lang video, which is a surreal thesis talking about like the ideas of creating and and like impact on culture and society, and just trying to be different, find a new path. And so on their website they have a two paragraph mission statement, but most of the words are blocked out, but what remains is this sentence: our community speaks different languages and breaks formats for the curious. Entire following paragraph is redacted. We are creators. PG Lang. And so all of these moving parts are not just interesting to me like as like a Kendrick fan, but as just like a person who is interested in like just creative platforms and places for people to share perspectives and really pioneer. I think both partnering with the bigger Universal Music publishing group, and also having this solo, or not solo, but like this other organization that he owns, leaves me with a lot of questions about what's next, what can be, and all of that.
Well, I think it's interesting too for him to be going to the arguably the largest record label in the entire world, and then starting his own thing where he is going to help foster more of this talent. And it's kind of speaking to not just like, being independent creatively, which, certainly is, and doing all sorts of different things and who knows what, and I'm sure everything is on the table, but then also kind of creating that space for others to kind of walk in his footsteps and kind of do their own thing and not necessarily that they're walking in his footsteps to be the next Kendrick Lamar, but to be, the next, for goodness sakes, Pulitzer Prize winning, rapper, which is huge. So, being able to like create that platform for these creatives and doing whatever it is kind of that they're doing, be it, music or film or books or podcasts, who knows what it's going to be. I think that speaks a lot just to who he wants to be and kind of like what he wants his mark to be on the world, even, because, when you go to Universal, you're looking at Justin Bieber and Justin Timberlake and Taylor Swift and all these people, and that's wonderful, but like, creating this space for other people, that takes a lot more work, in my opinion, and a lot more dedication to the craft than just being a massive pop hit. Yeah.
It's interesting you're talking about like creating that space for like other people to succeed. One of the things that about PG Lang is that he's bringing alongside a lot of frequent collaborators of his, specifically Dave Free, his who's done a lot of Dave Free, who produced and directed a lot of iconic Kendrick Lamar music videos like Humble, which won a lot of awards for just its visual. It's just a if you're just treat yourself and watch it on mute if you just want to appreciate it visually. He's also signing his cousin as like the first artist to be a part of this company, and so it's going to be interesting to see like the growth of that comes from community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of things that are growing,
oh boy, what is segue?
Burger King is no stranger to unique advertisements. They've been using their burgers to kind of like raise awareness for anti-bullying, to I think net neutrality. And so Burger King is, and so they're no stranger to create having a unique perspective to like promoting their
products,
their products,
and doing things very differently than the industry would have them do.
Good.
Well, so they released this campaign. They released it a while ago. I'm not entirely sure when it came out. Do you remember when it launched? I think it was like back in March. Maybe? Yeah, something like that. And it was called the Moldy Whopper. Basically, they did this campaign where they let their burger mold for 30 days, 34 days, 30 days, something like that. And the idea is showing, hey, there's no preservatives in this thing. It's
real.
It's real. It's all real food that is going to mold over time. And so Film Supply did a really great interview with the creative director at the film agency, David Miami, who they worked with Bjorn and a couple other big creative agencies, ad agencies, to do this campaign. And so Simon, you found this, and I was looking at it, and I was like, I don't remember seeing the campaign. I have ad blocker everywhere, so I don't really see ads very frequently. But I saw this, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting because at first glance, it's like, okay, it doesn't mold, or molds, and there's no preservatives. But when you think about it more, this goes against pretty much every tenet of food advertising.
Oh, for sure.
That you can think of. Like, food advertising is about making your product look the absolute best and tastiest. And to the point where sometimes they don't even use
the actual product,
the real product. They're using the most famous one. I'm not sure if they still do this, but at least they used to use motor oil instead of syrup for like pancakes and waffles, because it doesn't sink into or doesn't get absorbed by the pancake or the waffle. And so in an industry that is rife with this kind of thing, this is really very countercultural. And a very different take on this type of advertising, which really, really surprised me. And I didn't expect to see it, done, especially this high profile way, from a place like Burger King, where you go to, you go to Burger King or McDonald's or Wendy's or whatever, and they have entire photography studios dedicated to being essentially kitchen photography studios, where they can cook all of the food exactly as it gets cooked in the restaurant, but they can make it look the best that it could possibly look. So they released this ad campaign. They did it in print, and they did a video version of this Whopper getting moldy. And I just think it's a really good case study on thinking about your product differently, thinking about, because there is only so many ways that you can advertise a burger, and there's only so many ways that you can advertise most food for the most part. And, and this is a very different way of doing that, which I really appreciated seeing.
Yeah, for sure. Their tagline was like the beauty of no artificial preservatives. And so just like the idea of like this ugly, moldy burger, and finding like the beauty in it, it's just just very fascinating. Just very, really dope to see like a company like take a different perspective at what it means to present and market food. Absolutely. One of the interesting things about like the development of you mentioned the article from Film Supply. One of the interesting elements of like the creative process for this shoot was like they needed to do it twice, and so it's a 30-day time lapse to just like show the actual passage of time for this sandwich. And the first time the mold didn't look right, which is
it looked too gross even for the ad,
which is a sentence. And so I just think that's also interesting. Like, you're working with like big mega company as in Burger King, and you're part of like an agency that all have these deadlines and needs, and having the nerve to like take 30 days for this commercial shoot is already in my perspective pretty significant, pretty mind-boggling. But then having like the creative liberty, the creative wiggle room to then do it again twice. That's just really cool.
Yeah,
fighting for it.
Yeah, and I think there's a really good. I mean, you look at the ad, and it starts out as like a traditional like burger ad, right? Like, it's got the ketchup dollops placed just so. It's got, you know, all the ingredients kind of stacked so you can see them. And then it just kind of decomposes, get like all green and blue and white and gross looking and fuzzy. I think the fuzzy is probably the worst part of it. It's like, that's not supposed to be fuzzy, and it's just fuzzy, you know?
I can just like see the spores just like circulating.
Yeah.
You can feel it.
It just looks so gross, but like, just like doing that is such a flip on, you know, the comparison. And they even talk about the comparison with McDonald's, and they were like, well, we thought about doing this where we compared it to McDonald's. We decided not to. And then we were glad we didn't, because everybody else did. And I think that was the real tenet, or the hallmark of a great ad in this way, is that the immediate reaction of everybody was to go to McDonald's and say their main competitor and say, does yours do this? And the answer is no. McDonald's does not mold, which is, again, the whole premise, and equally as gross, probably. Yeah. You know, sorry, McDonald's, you're getting really railed on in this episode. But, you know, it's just, it is really a brilliant stroke of creative advertising in that way. So,
yeah, like all things, there's a meme for it. Just remember seeing years ago not a Whopper, a Big Mac found under the couch years ago, or maybe months ago, and it was like, it looked like it came straight out of the packaging. It's like.
It's like, this is gross. Why is it still like this?
It's like you have the exact opposite of this ad. Is like, it looks fresh, and that concerns me. And
I think there have been several YouTube videos where people have done that as well. With most McDonald's food, the fries, the burgers, and something else, maybe the chicken tenders. I can't remember. But yeah, it's pretty gross either way.
Yeah. But it is cool, like what you were saying. It just it lets the audience do like the work. The commercial the commercial is done in a way that the audience then starts like doing the bragging for the company.
Absolutely,
which is a really interesting way to like own your flaws.
Absolutely.
Kind of like, you know, the ending battle of 8 Mile. Like, yeah, these are my flaws. I'm natural. I'm real. Yeah, being able to let that be like a
statement.
Yeah,
statement, and the thing that people know you as, at least for a time. Because now I'm not gonna be able to think of Burger King without seeing that burger like that. So we wanted to do something a little different.
Yeah.
At the end of this episode. And Simon, I want to get your thoughts live on the title for this segment that I came up with, and I didn't tell you about intentionally. We're gonna call it Big Brain Time. Ooh. Maybe we might change the name, but we want to do a book review, which, yeah, I guess we still read books.
Yes,
people still read books.
I've been told.
I like to read books.
I am friends with people who like to read books.
I do have lots of books that haven't been read.
Yeah.
And then I'll buy a new book and be like, oh, okay. Well, so anyway, I read this book this past week called 20 Bits I Learned. 20 Bits I Learned About Design, Business, and Community. It's written by a guy named Dan Cederholm. Dan was the co-founder of Dribbble, which is an insanely popular design portfolio community platform thing.
Think YouTuber for design.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, YouTube for design, Instagram for design, if you want to think about it that way.
With a little bit of LinkedIn?
A little bit of LinkedIn thrown in, yep. Jobs and stuff like that. So you can post your work. The idea started where you could post a snapshot of your work or a screenshot. And it's pretty much grown from there to being a lot of people will use it to get freelance jobs, and entire agencies will get all of their portfolio and client work from it. So a very influential platform, to say the least. And they recently sold to an organization called Tiny Capital. He and his co-founder, and they both, I think they retired. So he wrote this little book. It's not too long. It's about 80 something pages. I think it's about 90. And it's 20 bits I learned about design, business, and community. And he breaks down the 20 things that he learned about design, business, and community. Specifically, the community aspect being really important here for him, where Dribbble was very much a community-based platform. So I just finished reading this week, and we figured we'd do a little bit of a review for it.
Yeah. So, you were talking about this book being a list of 20 bits of lessons learned, but, you said like 80, 90 pages, and we're clearly talking a bit more in depth than like a listicle.
Right.
So it's like what, how does he, go through those little lessons?
So it's really nice. It's a really good format, in my opinion, because he takes each chapter. There's a little illustration, and then each one has, the chapter number, and it's kind of this big, kind of a big number, or a big kind of, I guess, lesson or point from the chapter. Mm-hmm. And so I'll read you number 3. So number 3, lesson 3 is pave the cow paths. And cow paths means like you're not building a permanent road until you understand how paths naturally form from behavior, which is a really interesting thing. But the chapter itself is literally like 2.5 pages. I don't think it's that. It's probably 2 full pages. It's like a third of a page, a full page, and then like an eighth of another page. And it's not real in depth. Let me rephrase that. It's not real drawn out. It is fairly in depth in that there is a really good amount of content here. He maybe gives 1 or 2, anecdotes, very short, just a couple sentences. And then he kind of expands on his main idea. And then he moves on to a new chapter, which I found to be both really great because, you can digest more quickly, and you can pretty quickly reference it very easily. I can come back and say, well, I remember him saying something about cow paths. Let me find that. And I don't have to dig through a 300-page book with, endless numbers of anecdotes and things that most design most business books and leadership books and things like that will use. So I found that to be really, really helpful.
That is cool. So it's like, were there any other illustrations or ideas that kind of like stood out to you?
So his illustrations are really great because he drew them himself with like an Adobe Draw, like with his Apple Pencil. So
those are actual pictures.
Yeah, so he actually drew them himself, and he is not an illustrator, as he states himself. So I'm not just like, digging on him or anything.
It's like charming though.
So there's a very much a charming aspect to it. And most of them are just very straightforward, I like, he has one that's like people and relationships are what's most important. He has maybe they're, him and some other people, but they're just like little kind of caricatures, almost kind of like what we use for our main graphics for our podcast, and kind of just really nicely kind of succinctly showing off this main point. They all use, the similar color scheme of the book and all this kind of thing. So just a nice little way to kind of tie the whole book together.
You're clearly very fond of this book, or you think very highly of this book. How has this like changed your approach or appreciation of like the creative process?
I think one of the things that he talks about in here is he gives you a pretty good outline of the creative process, especially building a business, which, we cover mostly like, visual and kind of audio, like kind of traditional creative stuff, right? And that, you're making something and there's something to consume from that. In a business, while you are making something, the actual act of being the owner or the founder of a business, you're not really, you very quickly move out of the making something phase into making the business phase. And that is, and as someone who wants to do that someday, like that creative process, it kind of him unpacking those things from the perspective of a creative person was really enlightening and I guess affirming to me. He had one point here which I found to be really interesting, and maybe others who are thinking about starting a business or would find interesting, but he says start with a t-shirt. And he says every good thing starts with a t-shirt. And he's like, no, really, like this is true. And this is actually one of the longer chapters, even though it's the first one. And he says the reason is because if someone's passionate, interested in something, they're willing to wear the t-shirt for it. And a good way to find out of that is, and it's a good way and cheap way to do it, because, in the grand scheme of things, you can spend several $1,000s building the app to see if people want it, or you can spend $100 and make 10 t-shirts and see if people are interested in wearing them. And I found that to be a really kind of insightful comment to understand the importance of what your business is doing and how you're doing your business. And it's a very different approach, because normally you would think, well, I'm going to build the thing first and then I'll make t-shirts. Now I'm going to make merch later. And he's kind of taking that opposite approach, which I like a lot. So
yeah, kind of like the way you framed it, it really makes like you're finding your audience, but you're also giving them permission to like feel a sense of ownership of what you're building and what you're creating. That's
exactly what he says. And he actually has a whole chapter devoted to that. Let me see if I can find it real quick. He says, chapter 2, actually, the very next chapter is your first members are critical. And those first people that you invite to use your thing, be it a paid thing or a free thing, be it finished or not, those people are ultimately going to be your biggest either haters or your biggest advocates. Your first members or customers or users, or however you're thinking about that. And so when they start a Dribbble, which Dribbble to this day is invite only, so you have to be invited by another designer to join the community. You can join as what they call they call them drafts, and you can basically draft. It's all basketball themed, right? So like you can draft someone, and you can put up a couple little things here or there, but you can't really contribute to the community in the same way. And so what they did in the first time, when they started Dribbble, is they chose 50 friends and colleagues, folks and this is really important, that they selfishly wanted to join the community, people they really wanted to see what they would do at Dribbble, and they invited those people to join very intentionally, so that they could see like, how is this thing going to grow, and how is this thing going to be about, and how are these people going to bring about ownership and membership within this community.
Yeah, I just think that idea is really dope. And while you were talking, I just couldn't help but think about, couldn't help but like think about like how much, you guys, we appreciate you listening to us, like share ideas and like events that we're passionate about, that we're interested in, because the goal is, not just to, stay in the studio space, or Robert's office, and really, as much fun as that, as much fun as it is to, have these conversations and now just like publish them. It's going to be a whole other thing to like really, hear from you guys and see what you're inspired by and what you're currently in the process of like kinetically creating, what you're in the act of making while you're moving and doing, no matter what your medium is or what your platform is, your passions are. It's gonna be really cool to see seeing that grow and develop. So,
absolutely. And that was, and I think that's one of the things and the reasons that we started this whole thing was we want to see a really great caliber creative community come up you know, both where we are in Savannah and ideally everywhere, but it's not one that's defined by one type of creativity, you know. And I think, you know, when I bought this book, I was like, you know, this community aspect is interesting because so much of business and entrepreneurship is often focused on, you know, the bottom line and, you know, getting X% growth and all these things. And it's like, well, that often leaves out the very important human element in a lot, everything that we do, you know. And so to me, it was like, you know, there's a lot here that we can learn about even just our own journey here with the Kinetik Creators, and what we want to do ultimately with this is not just be a podcast, but be more than that, and meetups and all sorts of stuff. So
I guess t-shirts are on the way now, so
yeah, t-shirts. If you have an idea for a t-shirt, let us know.
yeah.
That's all we have for you this week. We appreciate you hanging around. If you like what we're doing, subscribe and review us on your podcast app and tell your friends. If you want to chime in or share something you think we should talk about, email us at kinetikcreators@gmail.com. That's KINETIK creators@gmail.com. Until next time, peace.